Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2. I guess it's kind of episode 1 in this series. This will just be probably a 2-part series based on creating a landscape. So the first part, we're just going to cover how to set up everything, get your project ready to use, as well as we're just going to make a base landscape. So that'll include sculpting your landscape, running through the tools that you can use for it, as well as setting up one material on it, like a grass material, and showing you how to kind of fix some of the problems that happen when most people first create a landscape. Alrighty, first thing we want to do is, if you're working on Unreal Engine, I highly recommend that you also download the Epic Games Launcher, as this will give you access to the Epic Games Marketplace, which makes it nice to find a lot of free assets as well as materials and things to work on in your project. But for now, we're going to put this Epic Games Launcher on the back burner, and we're going to go right into Unreal Engine. So if we double click, we should see a screen similar to this. It's just asking you if you want to work on a project you're already working on, or if you would like to start something fresh and new. So if we go ahead and click on the games, I personally like to start on the third person template, and that's just because it's easy to get a sense of scale when you can hop in there in your character, run around and see, are the mountains mountains or are they just hills? Is the lake a lake or is it just a pond? So we're just gonna select third person for now, click next. We will be using some starter content. That might change though, depending on how the materials actually look. Maximum quality, you can do scalable, ray tracing disabled, and we're just gonna go ahead and give this a name. Just gonna be landscape underscore tutorial. We're gonna go ahead and click create project. And you see, once we get in here, you got all of this crazy stuff to work with. This is like a starter level that they give you. We're not gonna need any of this stuff though. So in the top left, I'm gonna hit in the file, new level, and we're probably gonna go with empty level to show you how to do it all from scratch. In order to get started in our landscape, we are going to have to go over into landscape mode. So up on this top area, we have all of our settings and sections that we can go through. But for the one that we're going to be focused on today is going to be the modes. Click that and hit landscape. It'll take us into the landscape mode. So you can click up here on the top in the modes and go into landscape. But as a recommendation, just to save you some time, it's probably good to familiarize yourself with the hotkeys. For landscape specifically, the hotkey is Shift 2. Press Shift 2, you should see a giant green grid pop up. This is going to be the foundation for our landscape. Under material, we're going to leave that blank for now. This is just the default material that's going to go on the landscape. And then you have your location. So if I were to go here and move this, you can see the location changes. We have scale, and this will just basically stretch out our landscape or squish it depending on what we want to do. For now, I would not worry about the scale. We are just going to use this, the section size area, to determine how big our landscape is supposed to be. So 63 by 63 quads. If we were to turn that down, you'll see the landscape gets significantly smaller per iteration. For now, we're just going to keep everything at the default. If you want to though, you can change a specific side of your landscape by going here under the number of components. So if you were to crank this up to like 32 and leave the other default at 8, you'd see that it is 32 blocks long and 8 blocks wide. We're just going to reset the default. Quick little tip, these yellow arrows are how you reset things to default. Keep that all the same, and we are going to create. So this is just a very basic landscape. I'm surprised that you can actually see it though, because we don't have any lighting. So we're just going to start with that real quick. Go to place actors. We're just going to add a simple light. So if we just type in light, we have a few options here, but for now, we're just going to go with a directional light. And if you see up here, it says lighting needs to be rebuilt, 64 unbuilt objects. That is referring to our landscape. Each object in the landscape is one of these little squares. Up here, you have your manage section. If you'd like to add a square to the landscape, you click the add button, and then anywhere you click right here would add it. And in reverse, if you want to get rid of a specific square, like let's say you finish a landscape and you notice there's a bunch of parts that you actually don't use, you can just go ahead and delete them. So grab the delete and then click on them, same as when you added them. Man, that coffee's good. Oh, I don't have any creamer. I'm a total wuss when it comes to coffee, so I just loaded it up with sugar. Alright, so now that we're in here, we want to make sure that we're in landscape mode by hitting Shift 2, and then we will go over to Sculpt. And so here is kind of where the meat and potatoes of the landscape is. We have all of our tools to sort of sculpt this landscape into however we need it to look. One important thing to keep in mind, a landscape is just a height map, meaning you cannot do caves or you can't have overlapping values. So if I were to try to get rid of like a hole in the wall, it doesn't do that. As you can see, it just kind of makes an indent in my landscape instead. And that's because this is a height map, so you cannot go into like a mountain per se. You would actually do that with an opacity mask, which we won't get into right now, but we might get into in the second tutorial or possibly the third one, depending on how long these both go. So I'm just gonna kind of reset this by getting my flatten tool out and scraping that across the surface. Now it's important to look at the tools that we have. So every tool that you go through will have these settings right here. The tool strength just determines how much of it you want. So if I were to say, put it on a really low tool strength and then do this, the sculpt tool is not pulling things out as fast as you might expect. But if I were to change that to something bigger like 1, where I just hold down the mouse, you can see, boom. Wow, that is a huge difference. This is just low, and this is all the way up to 1. So that goes for any of these tools up here. Well, most of them, I should say. They all have a tool strength as well as they have a brush size. Quick tip, a shortcut to change your brush size if you don't want to have to always go back up here to change it. When you're in the editor, you can just hit the brackets, the open and close brackets on your keyboard. It'll either increase or decrease the size of your brush. And then you also have brush fall off. If you look in the left side of the screen, you can see that as I lower the fall off, the center circle is actually pretty much coming right up against that outer circle. So if we were to sculpt now, you would see it is a hard cutoff. So this will basically just be a cylinder that we just made on our height map. Whereas opposed to when we had our brush fall off to the default value, we ended up with something a little bit smoother, right? Again, I'm just gonna get rid of everything really fast. Up top, we have a few types of tools. We have the sculpt tool, which is what I was showing off to paint the hills and like the plateau. The bigger this tool strength will just increase how much material gets pulled up with the sculpt tool. And likewise, if you want to take away material, you can just hold shift and then left click. We also have the smooth tool, which will just take some of the rougher edges. Turn the tool strength down a little bit. Just take some of the rougher edges of what we just made and smooth them out. So if we go and look at it, it's not as much of a crease, I would say, and it sort of smooths it out, gives it a more organic feeling to it, rather than just having like a circle brush on your landscape. So you use a smooth tool to kind of smooth some of those out, as well as the flatten tool can help you make plateaus, or I kind of use it to like as an eraser sometimes. And essentially what it's doing technically is it takes the average of the vertices within the tool brush. So if I were to click right here like in the center, you'll see that it basically just takes that center point and it creates that as your flat surface. So for now, again, I will get rid of this. That's the flatten tool. Ramp tool, also something very useful, and I actually just recently started messing around with. Ramp tool will allow you to create a ramp. So if you click once, click twice, go ahead and drag that up a little bit, you can see that we have this ramp increasing right here. Now, there's a few things. Ramp width over here on the left side, you can change that to be skinnier or larger. And then the fall off, which will basically just make it look a little bit more hilly versus like a plateau almost like we had earlier. So we'll just go with the default value for that, and we're just gonna do add ramp. So as you can see, creates a ramp right where you place the two endpoints. There's two types of erosion in Unreal. So your standard erosion, it's simulating what would happen when materials fall from the top to the bottom. I like to think of it as like sand, or you can also think of it as like a mountain ridge. You're getting this little point in the middle, this crease. That would be like the ridge of the mountain or the top of a sand dune. If we move on to hydro erosion, this is erosion caused to your landscape by rain. So if we take our brush size, move that up a little bit, it's making these sort of like indents, almost like a valley, or like if a river were to pass through like a canyon, you know, you would see something similar to this. Noise just adds random points along your landscape. You can change if it pushes or pulls. Noise mode, if it adds, it's gonna just push. If you do subtract or sub, it'll just subtract. And then both it will do both. Those are the basic ones. Retop is another one that's a little different on how it works. So retop is a way to redefine the edges of a cliff without getting rid of the detail. So if I were to retop this right here, you can see it's still a cliff, and it is still very much so a sheer drop off. Versus if I were to try to do that with something like the smooth tool, we would not get the same effect. It would instantly start to destroy our landscape and our beautiful ramp mountain that we just made. For now, I am just going to flatten everything out, and we can actually get started. So when you're making a landscape, the important question to ask yourself is, what kind of a landscape are you going for, right? Are you going for a forested landscape with rolling hills? Are you going for, you know, a giant mountain? Are you making a volcano with like a bit of like a village in the middle of it? These are all things that you kind of want to ask yourself right away. For now, we just gonna go over to the sculpt brush. So my landscape, I'm just gonna go with some small kind of hills in the front, and then gradually make a larger hill in the back, kind of like a mountain range. I'm gonna go up to a higher brush strength for the back mountain. Okay, and in the interest of time, right here, I'm just going to time-lapse me building the landscape. Feel free to take as much time as you need on your landscape. I just don't want these tutorials to get too long-winded, so I'm just gonna go ahead and speed up the footage a little bit, and I will see you when it's all finished. Alright, so moving on to the next step, we are going to add a material to this landscape. Going into our content folder, or content browser in the bottom, we go to our starter content. We can go to materials, and we can kind of browse through the materials that we want. However, I am just looking for this ground grass material. So if we click on that one time, left click it once, and then we're going to scroll down under the details section, not the world settings, the details panel. We're going to scroll down until we see something called landscape material. With our ground grass highlighted, we are going to click this little arrow, and that's just going to load it right here. Bada bing, bada boom, you have your first landscape. Now, this isn't the most prettiest thing. This is just sort of something I did just to kind of show some of the tools off, as well as, you know, what you can do with it. Obviously, this is not the extent our landscape will go to, because this might not be the best looking landscape. But for now, that should do it for our first video. Thank you very much, guys, for stopping on in. I really appreciate the views. I am starting, so keep that in mind. I am a beginner myself. I'm trying to avoid the whole situation of, the blind leading the blind. So I will constantly be improving my skills on the way through these tutorials. I just want to give you guys a bit of a base understanding of how everything works, just so that if you want to mess around, you can, and kind of build you guys up so that you can enjoy yourself in Unreal Engine and just fool around and make whatever you desire. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. That does it for our first video, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like down here. If you have questions, I would love to hear them. Go ahead and just leave a comment, or you can even message me. Whatever works best for you and you're most comfortable with, that is fine. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button down here. Ring that notification bell so you get all of the notifications. Again, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you guys next week, where we will work on creating a material for our landscape from scratch, as well as creating an auto-generated landscape, which is really cool. That being said, I just want to remind everybody to stay healthy, stay happy, and most importantly, stay on the course. Working your way to becoming a game developer is incredibly intimidating, and it's something that I struggled with when I first started, so it will feel discouraging at first. It will feel like everything is really hard if you're just trying to learn this. It will feel difficult, but if you just stay on course, eventually through iterating, you will succeed and you will be able to make incredible landscapes. So I really appreciate you taking the time with me. Thank you and goodbye.